The people I've watched at the end of their lives weren't talking about money, status, or success. They were talking about sunsets, the people they loved, and the moments they wished they'd been more present for. Today's conversation goes straight into the heart of what so many men are wrestling with right now: success, identity, emotional intelligence, and what it actually means to live with strength and an open heart. Today on The Mike Method, I'm joined by Jeff Brown, transformation coach, co-founder of Expanding You, and the founder of Reconstructing Your Life, whose own path has taken him through identity collapse, addiction patterns, divorce, deep grief, and the devastating loss of his son. Rather than bypassing that pain, Jeff used it as a catalyst to reconstruct his life from the inside out. And returning for her third time on The Mike Method is Lynn Sumida, founder of Miruspoint Facilitators and developer of Prime Potential, whose lifelong work explores how early conditioning shapes who we think we are and how we can move beyond those identities into something more authentic. Together, Jeff and Lynn unpack why so many of us are strangers to ourselves, how men are often trained to provide and perform while disconnecting from their emotional lives, and why true transformation is not about gathering more information. It's about integration, practice, and learning how to show up differently in the moments that matter most. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, the best way to help us continue to grow our audience is to hit that subscribe button. Now let's dive in. Lynn and Jeff, I really appreciate you both making time to be on the podcast today.
Thank you, Mike. It's an honor to be here.
And I am delighted once again to be with you.
That's right. Lynn Sumida, 3-time returning guest to the Mike Method. And I really appreciate you, Lynn, because when we stopped the last recording of that prior podcast, which has gotten a lot of comments, and I've gotten a lot of people reaching out to me too to ask more about you as a result of particularly actually both podcasts we've done together. But when we finished the last one, we got into this whole conversation about men and what success means and what it means to be raising a boy in society today, and this different perspective on what it means to be strong, but also be a feminist, and that it just seems more complicated than ever before to know what is right and that right path to take. And you said to me, well, I work really closely with this great guy named Jeff Brown. And Mike, I feel like if the three of us got onto a podcast, we could really have a great conversation, because Jeff has such deep personal experience that he brings to it, like a lived sense of this experience as a man, not just that of from an academic or theoretical background, but he's been through it himself. And now he's helping to work with men one-on-one to help to support them. As much as in the group work that the two of you do, these same sort of topics come up. So anyway, Jeff, maybe I'll hand it over to you just to, obviously people have heard the introduction and they get a sense of who you are, but you've got some stories. Where do we start?
Well, I love what you're saying. I mean, right now, our society is conditioning and training our young boys on how to be a man. And so there's some real pitfalls in that. And so I look at my own life and my own story, and I pull back. I started very early in life creating a family. So I was married in my 20s. 21, I had my first boy. 24, I had my second boy. And I was living the family life. And I was very much living the script I learned from my father, which was be a great provider, learn to fix things around the house, take care of things, don't show any weakness, and hold it all together. And so I did that for my 20s, and then the marriage failed. And so at 30, I divorced, and I went a different direction this time. Now I went to a freedom of do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it, and live a big life. And so I took another script that our society is teaching, and I started to live that. And so I invested more into real estate. I started playing poker a lot. And started traveling around the world, and it brought a really big life. It brought a lot of money, it brought a lot of status. I did a lot of partying and spent a lot of time with women. It was a big life, and I would go to all the fancy restaurants, and there's times I would fly down to LA just to go shopping for clothes, and people would say to me oh, I wish I could live your life. And I totally get it. I was thinking, yeah, this is great. And it seemed really great. When we see some of this out there in the world today, seeing the manosphere talk, they're promoting this. And so it's not that there's not something there that's enticing.
Right.
There is, but there's something that's also really missing. And, that's kind of where my work goes to. And what happened for me is I was enjoying that life until some cracks started to show up in it. And a good friend of mine who I'd been close with since high school, got cancer at age 37. And I moved him in with me, and this would turn out to be the last year of his life. And so having someone you love, watching them die is painful. It's even more painful to watch their heartbreak from the regrets they have. And so my buddy Clay, when he was in that last year, was sharing these regrets. And Mike, it was like, he's talking about missing his kid's baseball practice, missing hockey. You know, like he said he was going to take him on a trip to Mexico. He didn't. This stuff is crushing him. And I'm thinking, well, he's lived a big life. I'm living a big life. I don't know what I was expecting him to be talking about, but it wasn't that.
Right.
And so this just floored me and my mind started thinking, well, what am I doing with my life? Like, if this is what happens when we're dying, then I'm missing something. And so during the year that he was living with me, about 6 months in, I took a break and thought I need a little space for myself to ground, and I went to Cambodia. And when I was in Cambodia, I went on this little trip down the Mekong River, and when we went to the little dock to get on our boat, there was a bunch of locals who were living in these 8x10 little huts on the edge of the river, and they had nothing, Mike. No electricity, no running water, like one window, the door was like little tassels hanging, and they were happy. They were smiling and they were waving, and the little kids were running with like a tire and a stick like that. And there was a volleyball net up. The whole community of kids were playing, like, I don't know, 7, 8-year-olds to 20-year-olds. They were so good at being community. And, a couple of the parents came over to help us with our bags.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because they wanted money. It's because they're community people. They love people. And so I couldn't rectify this in my mind. I'm like, well, they don't have status. They don't have money. They don't have material goods. And they are happier than the people I see in North America. By North American standards, we'd say they're in poverty.
Right.
And, that that's not a happy life. So my mind couldn't understand this, but it was another piece of I'm clearly living in some sort of large blind spot and I don't understand what's going on. And so when I came back, I started shifting into learning more about spirituality and meditation. And this is kind of a long road of change, really. I took what I learned from spirituality and Buddhism and consciousness work, and I tried my best to use it well. And I thought at the time I was. In hindsight, after I learned, I was missing the mark. I was very irresponsible with taking big spiritual teachings and using them quite literally. And it really actually created disconnection or dismissing of people, which wasn't my intention. I just didn't see it, and then the consciousness work and that can really lead us to detaching from being more in our heart and being more the human experience, which is also very enticing. And then in 2014, I got into personal development. I still had the passion and the love for the spiritual work, but the personal development gave me the tools and the understanding, like the science of behavior and why we're doing what we're doing, and the psychology and emotional intelligence. And that was really profound for me. I could see, like, I am missing the mark on all these fronts. Like, there's a lot of development needed in me to mature on these levels that I just didn't have. And so at that point, I eventually met Lynn, maybe 3 or 4 years after I started personal development. And I started learning the tools that we use today and the work that we use. And thankfully so, because in 2020, my youngest son, Joe, died at age 22. And with having all of this support from Lynn and having these skills I've been working on and building and still continue to build in myself today, I was able to really honor him and honor myself in really healthy grieving. And, to be with the reality of life and not just dismiss it as, well, this is what happens. Well, this is what happens. And it's painful. I mean, that was easily the saddest and most difficult year of my life. And I came out of it, Mike, with more clarity about what's important in life and what really matters. And so that links me to, in the end, what I'm learning overall in my journey, is sure, success is important and money is needed. We live in a monetary society, and people with money can do lots of things. They can give and create a lot of contribution. It's wonderful. But our life needs to be balanced with the people we love and having meaningful relationships and really slowing down to appreciate ordinary life. It is extraordinary. It is not ordinary, but we live as if it's ordinary. And for me, a lot of my life, I just took things for granted. And so now I really practice slowing down and being with each moment. And when I reflect back and watch, I've lost a number of loved ones over the years. And so when I reflect back and watch how it was for them at the end of life, that's what they were talking about. Sunsets, beautiful moments with the people they love, and I realized, like, isn't that the message, Jeff? Isn't that the message for all of us?
Mm-hmm.
Like those people in Cambodia, they weren't in poverty. They were living in freedom.
Mm-hmm.
They were open-hearted. They were free. And our society doesn't set things up that way. And so I can see how enticing it is for young men or men who are trying to develop themselves and to find success, to chase the money and chase the status and power and all of that. It makes sense. I don't wrong it. I've done it. But there's a cost. We're missing the things that really open our heart and really make life beautiful.
I really appreciate you sharing the sort of very intimate moments that have shaped who you are today. You know, to have 2 deaths in your own sort of awakening process through that. And alongside that, there's one thing that you said that really, it reminded me of this comment that Ryan Holiday made in I think it's in his Daily Stoic book, where he said, and he's quoting one of the Stoics. I wish I could remember which one it was, but the quote was effectively, you don't study Stoicism to tell other people about Stoicism. You study Stoicism to live the life of a Stoic, and thereby through the example of how you make reasoned choices and through the example of your character, Stoicism will be out in the. And I think one of the challenges when you go down this journey of personal self-discovery and you start to get into this place of learning, you know, for some people it's Tony Robbins, for some it's Landmark, for, you know, others they go through, you know, even Byron Katie's work called The Work is a methodology for self-discovery that some people land upon, or it's books, right? They read the Eckhart Tolle books or something along those lines. But what I find interesting is that part of that path is in a literal sense saying the things and speaking the way. But as you say, it's not really embodied at that point. It's just kind of known, or not, I wouldn't say memorized, but you're aware of it. And then you want to tell everybody about it because, like, this is so awesome. This is going to change my life, right? And so it's hard because it's almost like people end up kind of shoulding all over everybody, right? You should do this, you should do that because I just read this, or I learned that, or I was on this retreat, right? And then it does take time for people to really bring that into their soul and then realize that they can just be different in the world. And once they've reached that kind of stage, then they can go to the next stage, which is once you've reached reflective competence, where you're able to reflect back on the things you've learned and the things you've embodied, then you can take it to that next level, which is the ability to go teach others. But until you get to that stage, you can't really teach others. All you're doing is repeating stuff that you've read or heard, right? So
I've literally done all of that.
Yeah.
Most of the things you've shared, I've done those programs,
Yeah.
I remember in 2018, I was starting to build my coaching program, and I was like, okay, here's the things I'm going to do. And I started, mapping it all out. And I'm embarrassed to say this, but I looked at accountability and what I knew about it. I was like, okay, 100% accountable. Here's what you do, and as I was mapping out how I would teach it to people, it became obvious that I'm terrible at it. And I was like, oh, I have all this knowledge. I know it. But when I looked for the examples in my life, I had like a few examples where I was really great at it.
Yeah.
And the rest was a miss. And I didn't know, And that's part of why this is important. Like you're saying, I got caught in a pattern of like gathering more information, learning and learning and learning. But that's not bringing wisdom. That's not growing me. And so that's where Lynn helped me a lot with this work of like, hey, it's really about the experience. Yes, you got to get the information, you got to gain the knowledge. You have to put it to practice and, take it off the drawing board, as Lynn likes to say. But it also points to how blind we are to ourselves. Lynn talks about we're strangers to ourselves. And that's a way that we wind up masking it again, because our programmed mind, or our ego mind, is really great at redirecting to what it wants us to focus on, but not the deep stuff that's scary down there. It's always kind of staying away from that. Lynn, I'd love to hear you talk more about how we're a stranger to ourselves and our self-awareness isn't what we think it is.
Well, and I would love to even ask the question, because Jeff said, and then I met Lynn. Well, then Lynn met Jeff. So I'm just super curious what your experience was. And I'd love for you to answer Jeff's question. I'd love to know what your experience of meeting this guy named Jeff, he comes into your life.
Well, it's very funny because Jeff and I have slightly different versions of the story.
Okay.
Isn't that the way it goes?
Has to, right?
And yeah, but Jeff, as he said, was building his coaching practice and so on. And he said, you put together curriculums and things like that. Would you give me a little coaching around that? And I said, sure, happy to do that. So we had a session or two, and he comes in I think, for the third session. And here's what I remember hearing: I don't want you to coach me anymore. And
Okay.
Mike, I thought, my God, I've been fired. I can't believe it. I've never been fired before in my life. And I'm sure my face showed it. And Jeff starts to try and correct the perception, the understanding, and eventually says, I think, what I'd really love is for us to collaborate.
Okay.
And well, now that's a very different proposition.
Yeah.
What does collaborate look like, and what would we collaborate on? And so as Jeff put out some different things, only one thing spoke to me. And, I'm already, I don't know, Jeff, 68 or something. It's been a while since we started. But he said, Lynn, when I look, and he referenced the Cambodian experience and the joy, he said, what I want to do is help our world learn to have joy and appreciation without consumption, without this huge, driven, addictive pattern of consuming. How do we help ourselves love the ordinary moments and so on? And it was just like, I'm in. If that's what you're interested in, I could easily spend the rest of my life working towards that kind of world. So that's my version, and the rest is history. Because what we found that was really wonderful is a blend of Jeff asking amazing questions and me going inside and discovering what I would offer as answers. And between that kind of conversation and dynamic, we uncovered so many of the blind spots that people have, so many of the missing steps of how do you get there? How do you integrate what you know? Do you know how to slow down and notice what you're thinking that creates feelings and so on, and the whole experience of being triggered? And so that's been the wonderful journey for our company, Expanding You, of unpacking things and really figuring out the small steps so we build the skills. And then over to how we're strangers. I mean, at 75, to be still learning about yourself is quite, to me, surprising. I mean, I was one of those people that everybody hates who knew exactly what she wanted to do very, very young. And my whole career has been about people and how we grow and how we develop. But I never understood the incredible impact from 0 to 7 of all the conditioning that goes in and creates these patterns that we run at an unconscious level. I never knew, it wasn't even in the lexicon about, you can be growth or protection. Today we know so much more, but it's this really unfolding of how we're showing up right in the moment that to me is so exciting. And so that's why I say most of us are strangers actually to who we were conditioned to be and what we really want at the authentic level.
You remind me when you're sharing that, Lynn, of Tasha Eurich wrote a book, I think it was Insight, and in it they did a study on self-awareness. The whole book is about self-awareness. And in the study, they showed that 95% of people believe they're self-aware. And the results showed 15% or less are actually self-aware.
Right, 15?
15. Yeah. 12 to 15% are actually self-aware, which means in any given day, 80% of us are walking around thinking we know ourselves, but like Lynn says, we're a stranger to ourselves, and we don't realize this operating system is functioning inside of us unconsciously. I think we understand it, but we don't. And I mean, I've watched myself do this time and time again in my life. And usually it's life itself that will bring me the mirror or something, and I'll be like, I thought I understood that, and now clearly I'm missing the mark somewhere. Or this is why people go into coaching and therapy, to get the guidance from somebody who can be outside of them to say, this is the pattern you're doing. I don't think you realize you're doing it.
I think, at any age, the question is, if you have a growth mindset, then age is sort of irrelevant. At any point in your life, there's still more self-discovery, self-knowing, self-awareness to be developed. The interesting thing about that statistic, Jeff, is that the area of the brain that self-awareness sits in is the same area of the brain that empathy sits in. So if only 15% of the people are actually self-aware, then equivalently, a percentage of those people are the people that can deeply empathize with others. And that's not a huge number. And from a leadership perspective, we always say to people, the deeper you can gain self-awareness, the more you can figure out your own emotions and what's going on for you, your not just your likes and your dislikes and your preferences, but how you view the world and how you view other people when they view the world differently from you is where you dip into the empathy piece. But the ability to understand myself first as a leader is the first step, because I can't go to empathize with others. So now then, if I say, well, I want to be in a difficult conversation to clear something up, or I'm in a conflict situation, or I want to do strategic planning where we're brainstorming and then we might have to debate something, like, or I need to give feedback to somebody, or I'm going to receive feedback. If I don't have a strong, grounded emotional intelligence, then I'm going to struggle in all of those areas, right? It's like we always describe it as like a emotional intelligence overall as the concrete foundation over which you build all other leadership attributes, traits, and skill sets.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Well, and Mike, when you say that, I think then, so what is the conditioning that we're being exposed to in terms of developing emotional intelligence? And I know there's differences between men and women, but with a Japanese father and an English mother, they did not know anything about emotional intelligence. They were not nurturing us to tune in and turn inward. And they really struggled with feelings that were either the sad or the mad, or any of those types of feelings were actually off limits. They just couldn't tolerate them. So I think of that conditioning, then I think of how we raise boys. How much nurturing do we do for their feelings? I mean, the two of you could speak into that, but I look back, I had no training to be nurturing feelings in the way that I would do it today. And the whole awareness and emotional maturity, as you're saying, how do you nurture that if you don't even know what it is?
I think this is why Lynn and Leslie and I created Expanding You, is because we want to get this out to groups, get it scalable out to the world, and where I'm coming from today as well, when I do my one-on-one work with men, it's exactly in this. As men and fathers, we're not aware of how much programming and training is running in us, and then we're passing it on to our children, and we don't realize that either. And so, Natasha's study shows how unaware we actually are. So what does it take for us to start becoming aware? And so that's where I focus when I'm working on with man, to help them see what is the unconscious programming, the operating system that you learned. You didn't choose it. You digested or absorbed it or inherited it. Like Lynn said, before the age of 7, and even some of the studies show a majority happens before the age of 2. You don't have a cognitive mind that's discerning at those times. It's just coming in. And when I watch my own life, to catch my assumption or judgment or any of those thoughts that are arising from that protection side of my nervous system that's coming from programming, it's hard to do. Like there's times when it's obvious. There's other times I'm just totally in it. I don't even know I'm in it. And then later I'll be like, something fell off there. I was making assumptions, actually. I didn't know, because it's so familiar. I'm just believing what my mind's telling me. But the mind's actually often telling me things that are coming from the programming. And so, Lynn would say it's like you can't do your own brain surgery.
Well, and the funny thing is too, like, there's in the moment, people will be like, well, in the moment, do I need to be self-aware? And it's like, well, that'd be great. But sometimes you can't, because as you say, Jeff, right? Like in the moment, I'm maybe swept up in the emotions, or whatever it is taxing my brain intellectually. So I'm not really aware of my own self. I'm just trying to work through something complex that's frustrating me, not even aware that maybe the frustration is the reason I can't work through it, right? And I think step one is even just that there's that quote, an unexamined life is not worth living. Like, I think the first step is to say, as you just described, like, okay, I was having a conversation with my son or daughter or my partner or wife, spouse, husband. It didn't go the way I wanted it to. Maybe I could have shown up better in that. What was going on for me that made me feel that way? Is it I didn't eat? Is it I was having a tough day? I was feeling rushed. They said something to me that triggered me, like whatever it was, but I just didn't show up as my best self. And, one of the things we teach leaders is like, you can do a do-over. Like you can go back to that person and say, hey, I wasn't great in that last scenario. And, when you describe your context, the context description is not an excuse. So you're not like, I was a dick because I'm tired. So the end. It's like, hey, I recognize that when we were chatting, I was feeling like really exhausted and I did not show up as my best self. And I'd really like an opportunity to try again because I really wish I would have said this instead. And most people are receptive to do-overs. One, because it's not a commonly used concept, but most people will let you try again. And at the same time, the earlier we can catch ourselves being triggered. And so that's one, understanding stage one is, what am I triggered by? That would be helpful to know. The earlier we can catch ourselves, because words matter and they sting and they last, but they also fill people up with love and they last. So, we get choices in all of that. And the earlier I'm recognizing I'm triggered, then I can take a breath. Like this wonderful woman, Tana Hemmensley, taught me this wonderful pattern, which is A is awareness. I realize I've been triggered. B is take a breath. And then C is make a choice. Because our current pattern for most people is A, I am triggered, and B, I react, right? And that doesn't really work because it's a reaction. And what we want is a response. And so it's A, I'm aware I've been triggered. B, I'm going to take a breath or a pause. And then C, I'm going to choose a different response than my default response. The thing a lot of us struggle with is that, as easy as that is to describe, the challenge is you actually have to pick the different way of showing up before the trigger happens. So you have to already know what your triggers are, and then be like, okay, when I get triggered about that next time, I'm going to do this instead. Because in the moment, we're so hardwired, as the two of you have said, to our spontaneous programming that we'll just have our instantaneous reaction, and that reaction is not serving us well, and it wouldn't serve us as well as a response. But I don't know. I find it really hard to come up with a response in that scenario. I feel like I need to think about the response in advance for the next time that occurs. And now it's not impossible, because there are times when if I just take a long enough pause, I can ground myself and go, okay, I was going to say this, but I think I'll say this instead. This will be more helpful. And it sort of comes down to, do I want to be right or do I want to be loved, particularly in intimate relationships when it's triggering? And being right is the easy way usually. So anyway, what are your thoughts?
I'd love to talk about it. I think being self-aware in the moment, that's the gold standard. That's what we're aiming for. That is, like you're saying, not easy. And so there's a number of things that get in the way. One of them is, you've already talked about, what we do in our work as well, is we have people look at after the fact. Retroactively, we have worksheets to go, okay, what happened? Let's unpack. How was I feeling? What was I thinking? What was going on in my system so that I behaved that way? And over time, they start to learn, okay, this is what happens when I'm triggered. And this is how I stabilize myself because I'm dysregulated. And of course, our Inner Balance program teaches people how to stabilize and regulate yourself using these tools, and go the next step, like you're talking about. How do you then get into your values? How do you then get into your heart and open your heart to go to clean up in the situation, as you were talking about there, go back and clean up, a redo. Well, once you've got grounded and you're clear, the cleanups go really well. People lean in to somebody who shows up open-hearted, taking ownership, and wants to connect. And has that empathy. It works great. That's kind of the training wheels to get back to real time. And what happens with people is they'll start getting closer and closer to real time. So part of the ways we can do it is to proactively be clear about, how do I want to show up in this connection, relationship, this next situation. It's like a situational purpose, basically. And then when I have a clear way that I want to show up, then I go into that scenario, and it's like a North Star. And if I'm missing the mark, I'll know.
Right.
So how do you know? Your feelings. Right. Your feelings will signal you something's off. You have some sort of unpleasurable feeling, some sort of resistance that tells you either you've activated a program or an emotional wound in yourself, or you're resisting this moment because you're focusing outward and think the problem's out there. And so it is a big journey to get aware in the moment. It's possible. And with time and practice and great support, it happens. I had not to share from a look at me place, but I had an experience a few months ago. I was in the pool. I go to the sauna regularly. And I was in the sauna and I was talking to another friend at the pool. And we're having a conversation. I don't remember exactly what it was about. And this gentleman over to the left side just started jumping into the conversation. So I was like, oh, And at some point I was talking about my experience. He heard one word in what I said, and it must have activated something for him. And so while I was talking, he just cut in. It was like, I remember a time when, and he talked about this thing, but it wasn't what the conversation was about. It was about a memory that popped up for him.
Right.
And so for me, real time, I noticed my feelings signaling to me like, I don't like this.
Right.
I'm frustrated by this. This is annoying, right? But it's not, this is annoying. What's happening? I've hit an emotional wound of I don't feel important.
Right.
Oh, I feel like I'm being dismissed.
Right.
And so real time, then we go to know that means I'm activated. And then what is really going on then? The truth is, he's just something's excited him. He's sharing. It's not personally negative to me. It's not destroying the conversation.
No.
And because I could adjust in that moment real time, I was able to be like, that's great, thank you. And then go back into our conversation. I didn't exclude him, and I learned to stabilize myself in that moment. In the past, I might have got quiet, I might have got annoyed, I might have got a little cold towards that guy, And so to me, those are moments where I really celebrate myself and like, that's where the work's working. But it's not about perfection. I'm working on myself every day, all the time. I fall into the old patterns. They're so familiar. That's the journey.
What I like about what you're saying, Jeff, is there's a huge difference when some compassion or understanding arises in the moment versus trying to be more patient. And a lot of people, that's where they're coming from, is they want to show up as patient, compassionate, understanding. It's not a behavior in the sense of it is driven by a feeling and a willingness to just allow what's happening. And it does take practice, but it also takes skill. And Mike, I just feel so strongly, we are not teaching people the skills to be able to do what Jeff just described. We don't know when we go out of balance, and then we don't notice the first time, the second time, the third time, and now the fourth time we go and we say we're triggered by X, Y. Well, there were all these signals usually leading up to it. And so if we don't know when we're out of balance, we don't know what's driving that, and we don't have the skills to self-correct, including that take a pause, breath, etc. Without those skills, you're not going to pull it off the drawing board. And those are learnable skills. They really and truly are, but we have to break them down in bite-sized pieces so the brain starts to groove the pattern, make the links. And then it may happen in the moment, but we all know when it doesn't. That's more common for sure. And then doing that rehearsal, going back, looking at it so that I can be more prepared next time is a great strategy.
There's a quote but a model that I learned recently, which I love. And it said, so the options are, number one, I'm annoyed. So I can have that as an option. Number two, somebody did something annoyable or annoying. And then option three is I'm annoyable. Right?
So by the time you go to I am annoyable, you've given away your power.
Yeah. Exactly. I've given away my power. It has nothing to do with the other person. I may feel annoyed, but I am annoyable, and I am annoyable by that person. Like I am allowing them to have that power over me. Because one of the options is I can say nothing. Like I always say to my wife, she's like, why do you get so calm when things like people say dumb things or things happen in traffic or whatever? And I'm like, because I've chosen not to attend every argument that I've been invited to. Just to choose not to attend. And then it's just gone. And so I think, if we think about that from an I'm annoyable standpoint, it's like, oh, I have other options. I can not attend. I can choose to laugh along with whatever the person is saying. I can just choose to say nothing. I can walk away. Like I have all these other options. Or I can sit and stew in this place of feeling annoyed. It's a little bit like that adage, right? Like holding a grudge is the same thing as swallowing poison and then hoping the other person dies, right? Like if the person's doing something, they're having a good time. I'm annoyed by it. Okay, I'm annoyable, but like my annoyance is not affecting them in any way. Like unless I choose to try to make it affect them by stepping into it, as you say, right? Like in your conversation in the sauna and the pool, you're like, I could just let this go. Let him burn out whatever he needs to say, because it has nothing to do with you, right? He just needs to say some things. Okay, cool. Let him say his things and then he's done. And then he moves on with his life and you get back to your conversation.
The work that we do really focuses on what's going on inside of me.
Right.
So you talk about where you're putting your attention. That's often the shift. Quite commonly, we're taught and trained to focus outward, like the guy talking is the problem.
Yeah.
He's not the problem. My annoyability is why am I annoyed inside? What's happening in me?
Yeah.
And that's where I go into the programming, the wounding, the scripting, training, whatever you want to call it, how I've been conditioned. And this is where we get into this challenge with men not seeing themselves. And, so what's the training for a man?
Right.
It's like, don't show weakness. Know what to do. You know, you better be able to fix it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, win, be
Yeah.
successful. Well, that is so ingrained into us that we go out and we do it in the world and we're successful. But when we have to be with there's an opportunity with our partner or child who is in pain emotionally, well, toughen up, you know, move on. This, you know, win. These things don't work. They don't translate. And so then our partner or child feels like, I know you're a good man, but you don't get me. And we start creating this disconnection. And of course, the man doesn't see it because the man's like, I'm helping. I'm trying to help you. They don't need help. They need love. They need you to lean in. They need you to connect. So they feel felt and seen, you know, understood. But instead they feel dismissed, you know, and without, like Lynn's saying, the training, without the tools and the knowledge to understand what's actually going on inside ourselves and what to do about it, the habitual programming is going to just keep running. That operating system will keep going. And you'll notice from results you have in life or outcomes you see, you'll be like, oh, how'd that happen? You know, if you're aware enough and want to look at yourself, you know, you can get curious. And I can tell you, for me, Mike, the greatest thing that's ever come into my life with this work is support. Men are trained, in my opinion, to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
Don't ask for support because that looks weak.
Right.
Well, that's going to be your Achilles heel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've got a lot of wonderful training. It's come from 2 women. And it's come from my ability to be humble and say, I don't know. I don't understand. Help me. Teach me. You know, and when people have skill and you ask them to teach you, they love to teach you. They love somebody who's open and saying, I don't get it, and is willing to be vulnerable in that space. It's hard for men who are caught deep in their training because their training says never do that.
Well, and I hear when I listen to you, Jeff, and the helplessness when the things you've been trained to do don't work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other person doesn't want to be fixed, told what to do, et cetera, et cetera. So now we've taken away those strategies and you have this helpless feeling. It is very uncomfortable. And so there's learning to be comfortable with discomfort is a piece of what needs to happen. And that doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't mean, you know, there's anything wrong with you. It just means that what you've been trained to do isn't going to work and you're in that in-between phase.
Mm-hmm.
Well, last time Lynn was on the podcast with you, Mike, you were talking about Grant Cardone and David Goggins and that whole culture that it fits with the man training,
like Alex Hermosi
push
and
yourself, right? And all of that basically is adding to protect your heart, close it, push down what's not working, and keep going. I don't care if your arm falls off. Keep going. You got to keep going and just stay focused on the goal and drive. And like I've reflected with you today, when I look back at people who are in their last couple of weeks of life, that is not the stuff they're celebrating. They are not talking about their money or their house or any of their material possessions. None of that stuff weighs in at all. Where did I miss the mark where I really wanted to show my love and connect and I didn't do it? And where did I do it that I want to celebrate and honor and share again with that person before I go? If that's not the biggest test of how you've done your life, I don't know what is. And I don't want to wait until that last couple of weeks to find out. No. I want to start today, you know, building the man that I want to be, that has both the balance of success and open-heartedness, that has emotional intelligence and knows how to love myself and how to love the people around me.
I think that, you know, it just made me think of the edict of the gym bro culture, which is like, where do we hide our feelings? In our muscles. You know what I mean? Like, but it's funny because you look at the world right now, I think of like the world of YouTube and my daughters being in TikTok and even Instagram, right? And like the amount of filters that are applied to on top of the videos, and then 2, the number of like, as a friend of mine said, $30,000 a year millionaires that are, you know, faking the lifestyle and making it seem like, you know, they've got their rented Porsche and they've got their cutaway of a private jet that they're sitting in to take some photos and showing themselves playing poker, or, you know, at a pool of a rented Airbnb. And it's like, there's so much work put into manufacturing this whole thing. And every single one of these people is selling a course. Like, it's like, okay, also they're selling a course about how to do the thing they actually haven't done yet, which is right. And some of them have created some wealth, but at what cost, right? And I would not, it's funny because I think that the question is, would you trade? A lot of people like, oh, I would like to have the things that person has, usually material goods, right? Okay, would you trade exactly. Like you'd have to trade one for one. So you're also going to trade whatever disease or illness they're going to get in their older days. You're going to trade the childhood they had versus the childhood you had. You're going to trade a bunch of things that when you look at it, you're like, ooh, right. I covet this thing, whether it's a car or house or money or jewelry or whatever. But if you're going to trade, you have to take it all. And they're like, well, I don't want that. Also, the people that have really hustled and, are entrepreneurs or whatever and have created these things, would you trade the effort they put in for the outcome they got? Because for a lot of people, they want the outcome, but they're sort of not interested in what effort was required to create it. But I think that the concern I have for boys these days is like, what is this model of success? Because I know for me personally, like I've gone through climbing these different mountains. My first mountain, my dad taught me to set goals when I was, 13. At 18, I set a set of goals that I wanted to achieve by the time I was 30. They were all material in nature. So I hit them at 26 and I blacked out on a business trip in La Jolla, California. I was like just shy of 9% body fat, had a six pack, career was rocking, had the car that I wanted. And I'd done all this 4 years early. So like on paper, I'm killing it. And yet can't hold down a relationship, never see my friends and family. I'm away for work 2 to 3 weeks a month, basically almost decided to forward my mail to the airport because it'd probably be easier than trying to get it from my apartment. Right. And like, I realized kept buying more and more expensive bottles of wine until I realized there's no difference above a certain price point and I'm not any happier and it's not working. So then I burnt out and I'm like, well, if this isn't it, then I don't know what it is. Then my dad gets diagnosed with dementia and Parkinson's disease and then goes, I'm 24 when he gets diagnosed, 26 when I burn out. And then I'm watching him slide down into death over the next kind of 7 years. And I realized, okay, well, I need to change my life significantly and go figure out what I'm going to do next. No idea it was going to be a startup, which is now 25 and a half years in my company Virtus. But I knew I wanted to build a culture and I knew I wanted to build a great life along the way. But still, I was like, I'm going to read 36 books a year and I'm going to get into the Entrepreneurs Organization and I'm going to and on and revenue targets and blah, 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 all the things, right? So it was less about material goods and it was more about lifestyle and the things I was going to go achieve. So that was the second mountain. And now this third mountain that I discovered a couple of years ago was when my wife said to me, hey, there's a difference between being a provider, a father, and a husband. And they're very different roles. And they're important roles, but they're not the same thing. And she's like, I noticed that, there's some friends that we have that are really focused on, I'm a provider, therefore I'm doing a great job as a husband and father. And she's like, I like the fact that you focus on how you show up for our daughter, you focus on how you show up for me, but you're also a provider. And it struck me like, well, I have more roles than that. And so I started thinking about the roles that I play in my life. And then I was like, well, the number of days I ski per year, I used to track that and try to hit certain numbers as a sign of success. And the number of books I read and I don't know, so many different metrics to do with CrossFit and other things. And it's like, okay, I don't care about those things anymore. I'm going to ski when I want to ski. I'm going to read books because I like reading books. I'm going to work out in a way that's healthy for my body, not to say I've done a certain competition or whatever. And it started to dawn on me that I need to think about the roles that I play in my life. I'm a friend, I'm a family member, I'm a mentor, I'm a husband, I'm a dad, I'm a business owner, I'm a leader. How do I want to show up? And so I started writing these becoming statements. I'm becoming a father who, I'm becoming a husband who, I'm becoming a leader who, entrepreneur, mentor, friend, family member. And that's been more important to me to think about that. And I review that weekly to see, am I showing up in a way that is consistent with the character for that role in my life? And each year it changes, right? I'll be like, oh, that's not what's required of me or what I need to do to show up for those people in my life. It needs to shift now. And that's kind of my third mountain that I'm climbing now. And it's been a fascinating journey. I'm still, I still have all the things, I still have all the things that I want, but it's not the focus of my life. I get things when I need them, but it's not my reason for living. And then the things that I want have changed as well, because the things I want now are more about the life I want to live with my family and the things that I can bring into our lives that build that life, right? Versus a material thing that I buy and own that doesn't really matter.
Well, you've just mapped out what most men are going to live. And so when, that culture to push and succeed and strive, for most younger men, they're going to fall into that. It's very enticing because it's going to bring them to the material goods and that financial success they're looking for. And you and I both know they're going to hit a wall at some point, and then they're going to shift, and they're going to say, well, just like you when you went to your second mountain, now it's like, well, what is it about me and how do I grow? And that can create a whole nother hamster wheel of information gathering. And again, there's some level of me trying to prove myself to myself that's going on. And that's what's driving it again. And so it's still another form of the man training and the programming running, now just in a different context. I'd say where you've got to now in your third mountain is more now grounded in, okay, I got those things. I understand them. I see the pitfalls and the costs. But how do I be the father I want to be? How do I be present in this moment and evolve from here? Because where you are right now for any of us is where we need to be for the next step. And we're looking way ahead at the spiritual teachings and all this stuff that's more advanced than where we're at. It's going to create a gap or a spiritual bypass, or you're going to use the tool incorrectly because you don't actually have the skill and the depth to use it yet. And so I love what you just shared there. And I'd say that's really the goal for all of us, is to get to that place, and often life will bring something that will stop us, some crisis or something big that will awaken us to go, what am I doing? And that shift will happen again. I know it can happen without that. It hasn't been that way for me, though. I think for most people, it's going to be some wake-up call. And the reason the wake-up call needs to be strong is because we're so unaware of the operating system and programming that's running. It's just so familiar. We just don't see it. So something has to really jolt us out of it. And it's a big journey.
Lynn, wrap us up.
It is a big journey. Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is the wrap-up statement, but what I do like that idea of jolting, because what I was going to offer is we're being asked to be jolted out of frameworks like I'm this, I'm the provider, I'm that, these kind of distinct roles. And as you were talking, Mike, I was thinking of the have, all the stuff, the do, and then the be. And to me, once you get to being, you start to let the roles and the categorizations melt. The boundaries soften. Mike is Mike. And Mike really, from what I know about you, you want to consistently be Mike, showing up with curiosity, with love, with care, all those things. And so that becomes the center of how you do life, regardless of, in a sense, context.
I call that my purpose. That's what I use that as my central purpose statement. And then I go into the roles for that. You've nailed it. That's exactly how I operate in the world. There's one central core theme. Yeah. And then there's the roles that I play. Lynn, Jeff, this has been phenomenal. Lynn, you said to me, you're like, I know who would be a phenomenal guest. And I would like the both of us to come on the show, because I think we could create such a great episode, and your assumptions were 100% correct. So thank you so much, my friend, for putting this together and making this happen. And Jeff, really, thank you for coming to share your story in such an authentic and vulnerable way, and to share your expertise. For anybody who's wanting to know more about, both Jeff and Lynn have alluded to programs. There's some actually coming up soon. We will put all of that into the show notes. So all the links to everything they referred to will be down there. And any books we reference, we'll link those as well. So thank you both for today.
Thank you very much, Mike. It was great to connect with you.